Welcome back, everyone, to the Broker Room Podcast. I'm Michael Simon, and today we have Nathan Barkocy joining us from Colorado Springs. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you having me today.
Yes, sir. Glad to have you here. And for the audience, quick introduction. Nathan has one of the most powerful comeback stories I've ever heard. He was nationally ranked as a competitive cyclist with Olympic aspirations. Then, tragically, he was hit by a car at the age of 16, went through a long and grueling recovery, and through sheer grit and God's grace, he's not only recovered, but went on to build multiple businesses, co-authored an international best-selling book, which I have here, Old Wealth, New Wealth, and True Wealth. And now he's launching the True Wealth community, which I'll defer to him to tell us more about later on. So Nathan, why don't you take us back to where it all began, your journey, how you got started, and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And it's a powerful story that you give a quick little intro for. So I'm excited to dive into this with you. It all starts back in 2016 when I was a nationally ranked cyclist. That was my passion. That was my pursuit of greatness, was, on the bike. And I was state champion of New Mexico, youngest to ever win the Tour of the Gila for the category I was racing, state road race leader of New Mexico. I was top 10 in the nation. As a 16-year-old, racing against men in their 30s, right, semi-professionals, I was getting offers to go, race with development teams and race with professional teams so that I could, get to the Olympics, get to the Tour de France, go race internationally. That was my passion. That was my vision, And then January 23rd of 2016, I was on a training ride with my coach and my teammate, and I was violently hit by a car at 60 miles an hour. So that car shot me forward about 100 feet, and I sprawled out on the ground unconscious. You can see, on the windshield of the car where my shoulder and my hip smashed into the window, and there's just a spider web of glass. And my coach rushed over to my side while me being dead on the scene. He rushed over to my side and he was shaking me, Nathan, looking for a response, and I was unresponsive. So then the officer who came to the side of the scene reported it as a fatality, and they put me on an ambulance, rushed me to the ICU, and I was in a coma, natural coma, for 2 weeks. By God's grace, I opened my eyes again 2 weeks later, of course. And when I did open my eyes again, I was paralyzed. So this is a story of a lot of recovery, a lot of grit. I mean, I think you nailed it on the head when you gave this intro today, Michael. I think it's a story of perseverance, and it's really, it's really a resemblance of all of our lives. We all have suffering in some regard. Maybe you haven't been hit by a car like I was, right? But we all have suffering in some regard. It's really the biblical corpus, right? That suffering, death, and resurrection. And that's made evident in my life, and that's made evident in a lot of our daily life, as the sun rises and sets. And so I think it's really incredible to be able to help people understand the value of our time, because tomorrow is never promised, right? As you can see in my life. So that's why I am so passionate about helping people understand that time is our most valuable asset. Tomorrow's never promised. So let's use our time today, for the best possible reasons, to increase the true wealth around us in our communities, to build those businesses, to create freedom of time through multiple streams of income. And that is precisely what I just did with Sharon Lechter. She's the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the co-author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so that book really helped people understand money. It was the largest best-selling financial literacy book in the world. And so that's why I reached out to her and I said, listen, you did it with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. How about we do it together and we redefine wealth? Because wealth goes so far beyond just the money, It goes into the person that we become and the life that allows us to live. And she was gracious enough to bring me on and work with me in the co-authoring of this book, Old Wealth, New Wealth, True Wealth, which has taken off. Like you said, it's an international bestseller now. We're getting it out on a lot of different platforms and to a lot of different people, and a lot of people are really starting to respond back to me with quotes from the book and with just really a lot of passion behind it, because I think this book is particularly written for the younger generation who's really lost maybe a sense of purpose because of all this AI, because of all of the noise that we're surrounded in, right? We're drowning in noise, but I think we have a generation that's starving for truth, right? And even though we are that younger generation, right? I'm 26 years old, so I'm very grateful to be able to speaking to all of my all of my fellow proactive and aspiring entrepreneurs. But that doesn't necessarily have an age gap, right? There's a lot of proactive and aspiring entrepreneurs across the board. Whether you're in your early or whether you're in your he's looking to get out of your 9 to 5, the proactive and aspiring entrepreneur mindset is what really drives people forward. And that's exactly what this book was written for. That's exactly what we're delivering with the message of true wealth. And my intent is to really redefine wealth for, this new generation and for an entire nation, so that they understand the value of their time and how they can leverage that value to create more value in other people's lives, right?
Yeah, time is the greatest commodity I know of, and just what you've done with yours, really is so incredible. Even before, the accident, you were still on, an incredible path, and you didn't let any of that deter you. You made a full recovery, and now you're, doing what you're doing today. So, fast forward a little bit on the journey here. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what you're doing now?
Yeah, so when I was in college, I was working for a real estate investment firm based out of New Jersey, and I was the assistant to the CEO. And at that time, I knew I didn't want to go on and graduate college and just be an employee. I always have had the passion to do something more, right? And to create an impact. And when I was a competitive cyclist, I thought that was, winning races. And now that my life had a shift in direction, I realized, we needed to do something else. And so they were teaching me how to be a good employee in college, but I wanted something more, And so that's why I got this position with Josh McCallan. He's the owner of Accountable Equity. So I was his assistant. And that's what really opened my eyes to the long-term tax-advantaged wealth of real estate, and how you can really grow generational wealth through real estate, through real assets like real estate, cash flowing real estate, of course. And so I was working with him, and the summer between junior and senior year, he actually fired me, and he told me, you know what, Nathan, you need to go start your own business. And so I tell people that was the biggest call to action I could have ever had. It's another story of suffering, death, and resurrection, right? So I was intending to continue to grow and learn with him while I was getting paid. It's like, paid mentorship pretty much. I was ready to just keep floating on that wonderful salary and keep building up my income, because I was about to propose to my girlfriend, and I was ready. That was the future, and it was safe and secure. And then he fired me, and so now I'm deer in the headlights, not knowing what to do. But of course, I did have that CTA, and so I did. I went out and I invested into my first real estate portfolio, and I began my first process. I began all of the businesses from there, and it's continual, Michael. This story of the trials that you face and how you overcome those trials is exactly my life story, and I think it relates to all of us, because then my new luxury development townhome portfolio that I invested into, turns out it was improperly developed. So I had to call in a GC who demoed and took out all of the bathrooms, which were on the third story of my 4-story townhomes. And so this was a big commitment to demo and entirely replace the bathrooms because they were improperly developed. Mm-hmm. And I saw during that process how necessary the real estate restoration business truly was. And I also saw some holes that I could fill, some things that I could fix in the process to ensure that we're serving all of our clients with the most fiduciary mindset, the best fiduciary mindset you can even conceive of, because it's pretty easy for clients to get lost as just another number for all of these larger corporations. So I've now built a team of experts that is running my real estate restoration business, which is a result of course, the improperly developed bathrooms. And now my restoration business we're scaling at this point. I hired a couple people last month, and we're scaling pretty rapidly with deal flow. And we're really serving our clients with a fiduciary mindset and ensuring that we can leverage their insurance policies for their best interest and coordinate with their insurance as well. And so this is all a continual, representation of, my life nearly ended. Well, it did. My life ended. Then I had the suffering of my recovery. And then now I'm here, co-authoring a book with Sharon Lecter. And then my real estate portfolio was a brand new luxury development. And I intended to invest into that because I thought, great, new development, no leaky toilets, no Class C problems. Well, sure enough, it was improperly developed, so now there's the leaky toilets, there's the suffering, the death was the ripping out of the bathrooms, but then the resurrection came because I didn't let that stop me. We've replaced the bathrooms, we've repaired those. I had to take out loans to do that. We had to do a lot of leveraging all over the place. But that, of course, was now the idea to help me launch my next business, which is my restoration business. And so that's now what we're growing. And I think it's really important. The number one message I would have for your audience and for the whole world is that we all will encounter suffering in some regard, as you can see many times in my life story. But we shouldn't use that suffering to hold us back or deter us from growth, right? We should use that as fuel to launch us forward, as motivation to drive us forward, because we'll all encounter it, right? We all encounter death. We all encounter suffering. But what do we do with that?
Yeah, I mean, the perseverance really is remarkable. I think you are the very essence of the saying, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. That's all you've done your entire life. You got handed a couple of unfortunate circumstances, and, you just kept coming back stronger and stronger, which is really, really remarkable. And, with the restoration, when you invested in the real estate portfolio, you just went on site, you started noticing, a lot of them where, I don't know if the proper term is, not up to code or just, a mess. And then is that when you said to yourself, what, how can I, turn this to my advantage? Maybe I can actually go in, fix them, and, get some profit out of this.
Yeah, so it was an opportunity where I did call in a third-party team, but I walked the units with them. So all of my tenants had reported leaks in their bathrooms, and they were all very similar. And so then I called in a team, and it was wonderful because this general contractor that came in, he was an expert doing this 40 plus years, and so he walked the properties, and he can see minor little details about what was wrong with the property. So sure enough, we demoed everything. We cut down to the core, to the guts of the property, and we saw the real root of the cause, which is improper development. And so I could get into a whole story about how it was improperly developed, but that doesn't really matter. We saw the mishaps of the developer and how that really affected the safety, health, and cleanliness, of course, for my tenants, as well as the structure and security of the property. And so I came to a full understanding of how the restoration process needed to occur, what steps needed to be taken and how to execute on those steps. And then I, of course, started bringing in a team of experts around me to be able to execute those steps for all of my clients going forward with my restoration business. So the biggest thing that any aspiring entrepreneur really needs to get a hold of is the fact that, if you want to become, it's a good friend of mine, J.V. Crum III, he always says, if you want to create $1 billion company, right, you don't wake up in the morning thinking, how can I build $1 billion business? You wake up in the morning and you think to yourself, how can I improve the lives of 1 billion people? And there you go, you just got $1 billion company. So you work to improve the lives of those around you, of those in your community, or on a macro scale, you're looking to improve the lives of 1 billion people, and therefore you create, a real business that's based upon true capitalism and the betterment of society, which is all about, that is what true wealth is all about.
Yeah, I mean, we all, need to work, we need to get paid, we need to make a living, but it's really incredible when you can do something that, you really see the benefits from, not just for yourself personally, but for others. You really going to bat for your tenants that way. I don't know how many people would have done that, in your situation. Maybe some of them would have just been, I don't know, maybe a little bit more keen to, just brush it off, or maybe just try to, do something a little bit more half-assed, so to speak, not to really go the distance and not only find the root of the problem like you did, but ensure that this doesn't happen for anybody else going forward. So you really went above and beyond for that for your clients.
Yeah, and we saw that. I mean, the developer that came in, they were trying to cover up their improper development. And so they were trying to do a lot of cover-up work for it all. And I said, no, let's get to the root core of the problem, right? I'm not looking to just do, I'm not looking to put lipstick on the pig, so to speak, right? I'm looking to actually get to the root of this issue and resolve that. And that is real honesty, and that's what needs to be the foundation of real business,
Yeah. Fully agreed. Without honesty, without trust, without rapport, you've got nothing. It doesn't matter, what industry or what business you're in. So that's key. Absolutely. And now, you see yourself in this niche, which it's very fascinating. I hear a lot of different types of niches from all the people that I speak with, but this is definitely one that I've never heard of before, and I, love the concept of it. I love how it's applied, how you discovered it. Now, what would you say in the present day some of the challenges, or trends in the industry that you see? And then, we'll get a little bit more into AI. You mentioned that earlier, how that's, affecting things as well.
Yeah, I think right now business owners need to know how to leverage AI if they're going to scale. It's gotten to the point with the AI capabilities that if you are unable to manage, or create an AI employee base and run a business leveraging the powers of AI, you're getting left in the dust. I've personally seen that because I tried to build my business, the good old fashioned way, right? Just through organic leads and organic lead gen and organic relationships and all this stuff. And that's great. That's the foundation of business, right? But to scale at a capacity that you're able to, bring on multiple employees and really serve a large population, serve a large client base, you do have to leverage the capabilities that we have now. And even if you're on a smaller scale, there's no point to avoid the AI, right? There's no point to be ignorant of AI because that's the transition. We're in a big wealth shift right now, and this is exactly why I built my True Wealth community, is because within these next 4 years, we're going through such a colossal wealth shift that people really need to comprehend that shift. They need to get into real assets and they need to own real businesses. They need to be able to structure those businesses, structure the cash flowing real estate or the real assets, because that is another example of people getting left in the dust, right? People that are simply just trading their time for dollars. There's no way to build generational wealth upon that, because as soon as you're done working, the money stops coming, right? And there's no way to pass that on. So it's so important. It's pivotal for people to understand the importance of real assets right now and generational wealth and the tools that are established for us to be able to pass that on, to leave your legacy, right? To continue generational wealth and to build something that outlasts yourself. That's what we describe in the True Wealth community. I'm working with people that are just investing for the first time, on the ground floor, like getting into first time investments or startup businesses. We're also working with people who are scaling their businesses, and I have a large amount of really highly powerful and high-performing names. Aaron Young, who owns 15 businesses that he's scaled to 7 or 8 figures. Sharon Lecter, of course, my mentor. And we have Tyler Watson, who has established his own platforms. And Alex Stern, who has scaled multiple businesses to the billions from startup, right, from the ground floor. And Jeff Hoffman, founder of Priceline and Booking.com. And Brian Smith, who's the founder of UGG Boots. Those high-performing, powerful names who have scaled their businesses to the billions, they're coming into the True Wealth community to help current business owners really understand the necessary steps that you need to take in order to scale your business to that capacity. And it's always the main message of all of their presentations and of all of their content is the same as, I wrote in True Wealth, in Old Wealth, New Wealth, True Wealth. It's really, the value of your time and how true wealth goes beyond just the dollars, right? It goes into that lifestyle. And that's something that particularly Jeff Hoffman really talks about, the value of the lifestyle that you can create and the consistency that you bring into that and how you're able to not only scale your business, but of course, improve your life beyond that. And there's a lot of opportunity for young and aspiring entrepreneurs to be leveraging this community that I've built to be able to scale effectively. But of course, we can dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah. I love the concept of it because, in today's day and age, we live in a technological era. And, when I was growing up, there wasn't as much emphasis. I'm 35, so not too much older than you, but, there wasn't that much emphasis on, really being an entrepreneur, building your own practice, obtaining assets, creating wealth. It was geared more towards that 9-to-5 mindset, which, as time went on for me, I wanted to get more away from that. That's why, I do what I do now with my AI company, and then what I do with folks like you, talking about, what's going on in the industry and how it's affected you also. So, given where I'm at now, I can certainly understand a lot more, why there's the value in that, the true wealth community, and I wish it had been around then because, what we see really, we were forced to, not forced, but we were exposed more to things that just weren't of as much value. I remember in like high school or college, I would take a course in like algebra, geometry, chemistry, and I'm saying to myself, I'm never going to use this. So
Right.
why am I, being forced to, learn it and put other time, money, and resources into it? I'd much rather learn about, how to start a business, financial planning, budgeting, doing taxes, which no matter what path we choose in life, we're all going to have to do that. And, what you've done with the True Wealth community is, you've helped aid younger people, towards that entrepreneur mindset. You shouldn't aspire to be 9 to 5 for the rest of your life. I mean, if you want to, and that's your prerogative, okay, that's fine. No harm there. But I don't know too many people personally who do their 9 to 5 and then just say, this is it. This is what I just want to do forever. Retire at when I'm 65, well, probably closer to 70 now. Who knows what it's going to be, in 20, 30 years. And then after all that hard work, they just retire, and then, that's it. You live on a budget for the rest of your life. So,
Well, and Michael,
really,
how can that still be effective? How can that still be happening? We see this, right? People are just surrendering their lives because they're ready. They're pushing hard for retirement at 65. They're putting the money into the 401k so that they can, retire at 65. But then you hit 65 and your life goes downhill, right? If you actually can retire at 65, your health goes down, your mental, right? You've seen this time and time and time again, and we're seeing it now how that's actually starting to change. People are taking longer to retire, and they're not able to retire, and they're sacrificing everything because they're not actually focusing on growing real wealth. They're not actually focusing on truly creating, passive income that will outlast them for their family. They're just trading their time for the money. And I think that's exactly why you and I are on this podcast together, right? Because
yep.
we took a bite, we got a bit of the bug, because we know that there's a life beyond that. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of stress involved with, being your own boss, so to speak. But that's what you have to trade for it. I would much rather have a life that's, almost on edge, so to speak, really just pushing for the next greatest move and making sure that you're not making mistakes than, trading my time for the dollars because it's comfortable or it's safe. It's important. We need a lot of those things. Like, for example, my whole family is really involved with medicine and medical. Like, my sister's an occupational therapist, my mom is a physical therapist. That's all super important, very, very necessary. We absolutely need that stuff. But if you're really working to create a difference, right, and to actually build wealth, you won't find that in a job.
No, no. I don't think not only will you not find that, but most people won't even find, real fulfillment, with what they're doing. It's just same thing every day, doing just enough to get by, pay the bills. You're a young couple, married, maybe have a couple of kids. Maybe you'll be able to save enough to take a trip once a year, and then, you don't really have, you know, time for much else. When I was an advisor, I can't tell you how many people I spoke with where, they were doing all the things you're supposed to do, working hard, both people have jobs and doing all the right things with the family, but they haven't done anything really to prepare outside of that. They didn't ever consider, doing a side business, how to invest properly. Just none of that, really ever occurred. And then when people do retire, the question is, do I even have enough at this point? Because the money's not going to last forever. And if you don't have a plan in place to invest properly or any type of business to fall back on, you can be stuck, and it's not a very good situation. So that's one of the biggest things I think that we as a society need to focus on today, all of us, the new generation. When you're young, fresh out of college, 9 to 5 is fine. It teaches you some good life skills. You're going to learn a lot. But you should also always be working to constantly improve yourself, which is what you've done. Fine example of with everything you've done all throughout your life, especially in terms of the challenges you face. We all face challenges, but I don't think many of you had to do quite what you did. So again, kudos to you on that.
Yeah, thank you.
And, zooming out a bit more too, I want to ask, getting back to the AI, we talked about that and how it's affecting the times and the industry. You said that people are going to need it to help scale, which is true. And the general consensus that I've seen with everybody I've spoken to is no, it's not going to replace people completely, but it is going to bridge the gap, or widen the gap, I should say, between those who choose to do it and those who don't. And that's what I'm in agreement with. We need to focus on how we can use this to make our practices better, more efficient, not just for ourselves, but for the people that we work with. In your case, your tenants or, whoever else it may be. So, with that being said, have you, leveraged AI much in your practice personally with the community, or, have you not looked into that too much yet? What does it look like?
Yeah, I've leveraged AI very much, and I've built up my AI employee base. I definitely could. Everyone can always improve, so I'll continue to look for more ways to improve that platform. But I've leveraged multiple AI platforms, and I'm working now. Perplexity AI has this computer, right? Perplexity computer, and you can integrate all of your apps. You can integrate all of your platforms, everything at the same time, and you're able to scale rapidly that way. Not just with marketing, not just with lead gen, not just with the day-to-day tasks, but you can actually build out your platforms and leverage the AI there. So if you've heard of Perplexity AI, I should probably start getting some referral fees on this. Simply just promoting it because it's been effective for me, but that's definitely something to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. As we're coming up on time here, we talked a lot about, your journey, what it took, what you went through, where you are now, what you're doing now. So let's talk about, lastly, the future. What would you like the future to look like for you in the next 6 to 12 months in terms of just goals and, everything you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, so right now we're growing the True Wealth community. I have several clients that just came in. They're looking to really scale their businesses, some marketing businesses, photography businesses, capital raising, and social media businesses. They came into the True Wealth community because they want to learn how to scale their business, right? They want to learn from the experts that I'm bringing in, and then they love the concept of the community, right? Because it's so easy to feel like a solopreneur when you're doing it all on your own, as opposed to an entrepreneur, which is really based on the community. So that community is now provided in the True Wealth community. And there's a difference. There's a lot of school communities out there, but they teach you, how to grow your business, how to start your business, how to raise capital, whatever the case may be. But none of them that I have been a part of or that I have seen really hold the value of the pillars of true wealth, so the time, relationships, understanding, expression, really the will to move forward, your encounter with the people around you, the action that it takes to grow your business, really living, as opposed to just working like a robot, living your business, living your passion, founding that all on trust, making sure that people trust you and that you can be a trustworthy person. And the core foundation of it all is in your health. And so all of that is what we focus on in the True Wealth community. And it's been monumental to see the growth of my clients, and we're just now scaling out the True Wealth community. So for all people that are effective business owners that are now cash flowing their business and they're looking to scale or they're looking for more, that would be the community to join. There's also a level where we're really just teaching financial literacy, just like Rich Dad Poor Dad. We're really teaching financial literacy to, a population that hasn't been taught, what it really means to invest into real estate or what it means to invest your additional capital, and that way you can create passive income. And that's really what we're building in the True Wealth community. So my passion within the next 6 to 12 months would be to grow that community so that I could create a larger impact in the lives of these proactive and aspiring entrepreneurs and the business owners that are looking to scale their business.
Excellent, excellent. And yeah, I just want to add to that too, because you made an excellent point about the community aspect of it. I think that's a big reason why a lot of folks, we don't see the entrepreneur mindset with so many people, because I think that there's a lot of people out there who think about it conceptually, but then that might get, overwhelmed when they try to, go out on their own and they fail, or, something doesn't work. And then it's like, oh, who do I talk to? Where do I go? And if you don't have that community to help build you up and lean on, for teaching, resources, and what have you, that's going to definitely deter a lot of people from going into it. So it's really great that they have that to help really establish it and keep it going. So that's a strong foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're building that up right now, and it's been incredible to see the impact of that already. So eager to keep that scaling as well.
Great. Nathan, this has been absolutely fantastic. Your story, your businesses, and your mission are going to resonate with so many people, no matter what industry they're in. I really can't thank you enough for coming on today. Normally, before I end a podcast, I always like to ask, what's some advice or words of wisdom you have for anybody who's just starting out in the industry or, with what they're doing with their practice. But after everything you've said, I think we covered quite a bit of it. But is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Michael. I think, we've been kind of scattering those tidbits throughout this entire conversation. Really, the number one advice I would have is to ensure that you understand the power of association, right? Getting yourselves in the right rooms, increasing your network, because without a network, without mentors, there will be, your 30 years of learning can be condensed into 1 year of mentorship with the right mentor, and being in the right community. And so I would always encourage people to get themselves in those right communities, get themselves around the people that not only teach them how to grow their business, how to start their business, how to start their investment portfolio or scale their investment portfolio, but also that really hold the same values, right? That really hold the same core understanding of what truly holds value in life. And so I would say that's the number one recommendation. Obviously, you can find all of that in the True Wealth community. And Michael, you can put all of my information in in this podcast so that people can just click on the link there. But if you're interested in finding the True Wealth community, you can go to nathanbarkocy.com. So that's Nathan, BARKOCY.com. And you'll be able to gain access to the application for the True Wealth community on my website directly. And I would love to get in touch with you there. You can reach out to me at my website. And Michael, I appreciate you having me today.
Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate you as well. I'll make sure to include all of that for our viewers. And again, Old Wealth, New Wealth, True Wealth, highly recommend you pick it up. I'm going to dive into it later on myself. It came in just 2 days ago. Can't wait to get started. And with that, Nathan, that's everything on my end. Really appreciate you again. I hope you have a great day.
You as well. Thanks, Michael.